Hi, I'm Tyson, and welcome back to part 2 of my drum major tutorial video series. Here, we're going to be talking about basic variations on marching at attention, and also just a few of the many directing techniques. I'm going to kick you back so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll go from there. As we go forward, always remember what we talked about in the first video. Exude confidence. Own your role. Be sharp, precise, and pristine in all of your movements. So first we're going to talk about a few different variations on how drum majors will be at attention, stand, or just walk down the parade route. At my school, hint hint alma mater students, we stand with our closed fists on the bones of our hip. I have yet to see a band that stands at attention without their heels together. A couple hints for this going forward, so you can help other band members have the correct angle of their feet. Have your heels together and imagine an additional shoe pointing in between your feet. So if somebody came up to you and went like that, their foot would fit in between. So heels together, imaginary shoe between your 2 feet, closed fists on the heels. A more showy variation of this that we haven't done, and personally I find a little too gaudy, is a flat hand on the bones of the hip. This time you just put your fingers on the bones of your hip right here. This has a more extreme elbow angle, which makes it a little more gaudy, but I find it a little cheerleaderish. But if that's your band, own your part. So we have closed fists, open hand on the hip, and then a more military variation of this is the military attention, which is a closed fist, thumb down, the hands at your side, and you put your thumb right down the pleat of your bibbers or your pants, whatever your drum major, or whatever your band has, right here. No matter what you choose to do, make sure that your shoulders are always back and your chest is up. Obviously don't be crazy extreme with this, but that's part of owning your role and looking confident in front of that grandstand or parade route full of people. A hint to get this down pat every time is when you're standing here, hunch your shoulders over. Keep your back straight, but hunch your shoulders over. Go up, 2, 3, back, 2, 3, down, 2, 3. And then you are set. In most bands as well, but I have to talk about it. Your eye line is very important. Along with your hat, if it's a buffalo hat, beret, or otherwise, should be even with your eyebrows, the brim, to keep it the top level with the ground. If it's a hat, that would work like that. Your eye line is also very important. When everybody is looking at you, at least to start with, and you're looking up and off, even if your head is straight and you're looking up and off, people are going to wonder, what are they looking at? They're going to follow your eye line around the stadium and not see the band that they're supposed to be looking at. So not only do you want your chin level to the ground, shoulders back, but keep your eyes dead straight and, depending on the situation, elevated slightly. So we have our 3 variations, and you can take these and run with these. We have our chin level, our eyes straight, and this can go forward for people with other similar apparatus in the band if it works for them. Next we're going to talk about drum major directing patterns. We're only going to be talking about 4/4 today, but each of these can be easily manipulated to create 3/4, 2/4, or whatever adaptation you may need for whatever crazy 6/8 you may need, or beyond even. At our school, in order to make it easier for everyone to see, and it's easy enough for our band to see in our stadium, is a very simple kind of an OK symbol, and then you just fill in and bring your hands and your fingers together. So you have it's very contrasty, as you can see through your finger and thumb, and then you have your fingers to contrast whatever is looking through your thumb. So we have 2 of those, and then we use a very standard, uh, very square, straight directing pattern. Remember, as a drum major, in most situations, other than maybe field events or if you're directing inside, you're not a beautiful symphonic orchestra director with a very loopy directing pattern. You're not on a stage. Usually, you're not playing very conducive music to a very loopy directing pattern. So we need to be very clear. So however large your band is, they can all see exactly what you're doing, and they can see exactly where your beat is. The most important part in any of these drum major directing techniques is that your beats are on the same spot. So I'm going to go back to what my school has used, kind of the OK, I'll call it. As you go down, you want your 1 to be in the same spot. So put an imaginary dot right here on your 1. As you come in, you have your 2, 3, 4. Nothing crazy there, but in order for everybody to be able to see you as best as possible, they need to know exactly where that beat is going to be. Because if you internalize the beat like you have to as a drum major, it's great. But if you can't express that internalized beat, it doesn't do you much good. So as you go down, imagine a dot there, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hitting those dots every time you hit that beat. At our school, we have just a little bit of a loop just to help the band members. If they glance up on 3, they make sure that they see a 3 instead of a 1. 3, 4, 1, 2. What I found pretty difficult when I was starting, maybe not necessarily difficult, but very hard for me to get rid of once I realized I was doing it, was when I was coming up for 4, instead of coming up for 4, I was coming back because I was getting very tired. So I was come across and I'd come back. In almost all situations, except a few of the techniques we'll talk about that have a little bit of a z-axis, you want to be almost on a plane. Is that when you put that point there for 1, point there for 2, point there for 3, you want to hit that in all directions so you're on the same plane. So I almost find myself having to extend my elbows to go up for 4, and I think my hands are getting cut off, but that's alright. In all these techniques going forward, including this one, you want to be above your chest, above the center of your chest, in order for everybody to see you better. Even if you're on top of a ladder, podium, pedestal, whatever your band may have, you still want to keep it above your chest. That also goes back to exuding confidence. We're going to talk about a few other techniques that our school hasn't used before, but they might work well for your band. This is an old U of M technique. My mother, when she was a drum major, also used this technique. It's very showy and very easy for people to see, but we're going to go over it right now. This, you use almost a stopped hand with your thumb out. So for this technique, we're going to come up with our stop hand. We're going to chop. Remember to stay above the center of your chest. Chop, yell, push with our thumbs down, scoop. Chop, yell, push, scoop. Chop, yell, push, scoop. Here we're going to remember to put our imaginary dots in the air at each spot. Chop, yell, this one's easy. Push, dot out there, scoop, up for 4. So we hit the same spot every time. I'm not too great at this one because we never have used it in our band, but we've had a little fun with it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staying above the center line of your chest, and on every beat, hitting the same exact spot. This is easier when the beat comes at the end of your range of motion. This may work well for some situations, but not well for others. For example, if my arms are extended, which they won't be for this one, it's easier to hit that same spot if my feet aren't moving, right? If your elbows are bent, there's a lot of wiggle room there. But we'll come down with our elbows usually in this situation. Yell is easy because you're up against your face or about a foot in front of your face, depending on your situation. But when you're that close to your face, it's easy to tell where you're at. Push. Now this is where you'll probably be at your end of the range of motion, which makes it easier to return to the same position every time you hit beat 3 and scoop. Chop, yell, push, scoop, chop, yell, push, scoop. Next, we're going to talk about I call it the arrow pattern. I've seen a couple of elementary and high school directors use this in their regular concert performance. I'm just going to show you with one hand first. There can be a few variations on how you choose to direct this one with your hand. You could use an OK. More commonly, I've seen a hand with the thumb in. You could do thumb out. Again, exude confidence however you see fit, and most importantly, as long as you're exactly the same across your entire drum major chord. I'm going to use a flat hand with a thumb in. Then starting with just one hand. So we're going to come down for 1, and instead of looping it across for 2 like a crazy loopy concert directing pattern, we're going to come down for 1 and bounce 1, hit the same spot again, hit an imaginary point there, come in, point, out, point, up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is a little big, just so you can see what we're doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, we're going to hit our point in the middle. Everything works off our center point. This is going to be 2 with hands, but I'm just showing you with 1 for now. Point, there's 1 right there. Bounce, about halfway, or a little short of halfway. 2 hits that point. On the and of 2, we're going to come in like we would for a 2, directing like this. 2 and 3 back to that point, and 4 and then we're going to go all the way up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So our 1, 2, 3, 4 is always at the same spot. I haven't worked a lot with this one, but I could see how it could be very advantageous for many bands, especially if you're up on a ladder or drum major podium or pedestal, whatever name it may go by at your school. This is great because your beat is always at the exact same place, so people know in reference to your body where they need to look no matter what part of the measure you're in. It's also great for counting off and subdividing for your band already, because you come up on every and, 2, and 4, and it helps your band subdivide and not push you any faster than they need to go because you're already subdividing for them, which is obviously a tactic used to avoid speeding up or slowing down for that matter. So 2 hands, remember staying above the center line of our chest. That's about where our home point is going to be here. And obviously this is going to change a lot for many different bands, and what axis, if they choose to come back or otherwise, and what hand position they choose to use. But with a closed hand on a pretty straight axis, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Making sure we're hitting each of these points in the same exact spot every time. To make sure that you are hitting the same point every time, if you have one of the real music stands at your house, not the folding ones that can stand up really tall, put that up, put 2 of them up at the center line of your chest, so then when you come down, you hit that stand. Hit the stand, hit the stand, hit the stand. 2, 3, 4. The hardest one for me learning this technique, which is pretty straightforward and should be really quick for everyone, is getting the 3 in the same spot. Like I said before with our yell in this technique, the close closer we are to our face, the easier it is to hit the same point every time. But when we're keeping our eyes forward in our band, even if we're not looking at the grandstand, it's easy to lose where 3 goes. Finally, we're going to talk about one last technique. This is seen a lot in show competitions, national show competitions, and again has its advantages and disadvantages for every group. And you, along with whatever drum major corps may be behind you or beside you, need to figure out what would work best. This technique has many different variations as well, and I'm going to show you just on one hand the most stripped down version to start with. I'm going to show you with a flat hand again. Do what suits your group. We're going to come 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. For this technique, we're going to use a set of 3 different points that we're going to hit every time along the center line of our chest, or potentially higher, or if you're in a longer show and are leaning over and can be well seen, that can adjust, like any of these. But we're going to use a set of 3 points along one line for now across the center of our chest. That first point is 1. That's going to be straight down from our up. 1. For 2, we're coming in. 3, we're going out. 4, we're coming back to the 1 and going up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. This is a great technique in this regard because the 4 and the 1 are the exact same spot. When you hit that spot, it's always 4 or 1, which can work well for a repertoire that has a very connectedness between measures, also helping your band not to emphasize anything you wouldn't like them to. Potentially, if you want them to hit the beginning of a measure beat 1 very hard, you might have to add something else to give it a little bit of gusto compared to the rest of the beats in the measure, just because it's the same as 4 and it can get repetitive in the middle. With 2 hands, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this is the most stripped down basic version. Do what works for your group. Now what I'm showing you, I'm using my OK technique with your 3 fingers, your 3 rest of the fingers, putting in for contrast and ease of sight for your band. Again, flat hands with thumbs together is fine as well. I'll do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. That's the last technique we're going to talk about. Obviously, you could peruse the web for hours and hours and find out different things as you go forward. But in each of these techniques, depending on your band's expectations and needs for the specific repertoire you're performing at your performance, a cue may be warranted. This is where we start to get into many nuances of perhaps an indoor concert directing. The most clear cue that you can use, and the only one we'll talk about here, is if you can be a more active drum major, where at my school we are not, and you have the ability to turn, or potentially maybe only turn at the shoulders, or maybe only the head. But if you have a group that is having a hard time remembering a cue, or maybe hitting their cue early or late, you can put your hand up and cue them to where they are. If moving your shoulders and your hips, or even just your head, is acceptable, or the precedent has been set in your band, this would work well for you. Finding your section, making eye contact as with the collective section, and giving them a prep and a cue, and then however long you choose for your hand to be out. So if we just use 3, our standard square directing pattern, with a little bit of a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It would look like that. And then however long you choose to have your hand out would be just fine. Another way that you can cue people in a slightly less obvious fashion is if you can make very quiet eye contact, I'll call it, or a quiet body movement to catch them. Maybe you just change your eye line so the grandstand behind you can't see you. Make eye contact with them and perhaps move a hand towards them. Of course, check with your drum major what they're comfortable with that you're doing. Make sure you do it with the rest. You do what's consistent with the rest of the corps. Maybe you're the lead drum major and you have 2 flanks. Then you could be the only cue man or the cue woman. But it also can be difficult for people to get their hands working separate from each other. Because when you're going to go up for the prep beat, you're going to be tempted to come back with your hand. The only other thing we're going to talk about today is a 2-4 in our standard directing technique at my alma mater. Drum majors, here's your cue. This is what we did at my school. Our school song happens to be in 2-4, so when we direct at our school, we're going to use our modified OK. And as we come down, we're going to stay above the center line of our chest, and we're going to have, imagine a little fish hook as you direct. It's important to keep your hands above your chest, even if you're dying. Because even if you're dying, your band can stay together. But if you're dying and your shoulders and arms get tired and you come down here, then your low brass aren't going to see you. And then your band's going to die in front of everyone, no pressure. But when we're directing our 2-4, we're going to have 2 home points, but they're not actually going to fall necessarily on the beat. One is going to be no lower than the center line of our chest, where we come down to put the bottom of our hook. The second one is going to be where the loop of our hook leads. They're going to be very close together in the space in front of us. Where we go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The bottom center button or point could maybe be your point on the beat. 1, and then the hook kind of signifies that blank space between the beats. 1, 2, 1, 2. In our band, we find it usually acceptable when we're directing 1, 2 to have a pretty, not a loose wrist, but an active wrist. In most other situations, I want your wrist to be pretty straightforward, unless, of course, you're doing the U of M technique. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Again, like cueing, cutoffs start to lead into concert directing, which has many different variations, options, ways to go, all depending on your abilities and what your band or orchestra or choir, for that matter, needs. What we use at our school, hint hint, kids to my alma mater, is a very large and clear cutoff. It has a lot of prep, a very clear prep, and a very clear cutoff. What we imagine here is if you had a rope between your 2 hands and a big handle in your hands to grab that at top. Open hands, grab that handle, and yank that rope. And when you pull rope apart, it's going to kind of fight back once you get to the end of it. Also, you can go with closed hands. This is the most important part. Make sure you're with the rest of your group. This is always the most important part, along with confidence. But 1, 2, 3, 4, cut. So it's going to have a 2 beat prep period. 3, 4, cut. Or whatever beat your cutoff may fall on at the end of the song. So for our school song that goes to the tune of Anchors Aweigh, bum 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 ba-da-dum-dum. 1, 2, 3, off. At the end of our school song, we're going to use a 3 beat prep, just because that's how long we're going to hold our final note of our school song, and we're going to cut it off very clearly. Bum, ba-da-da, bum, ba-da. 1, 2, 3, pow. Cut off school along with confidence. Trust yourself that you know where those cutoffs are. Band members are taught to go with you, even if you're wrong. So if you cut them off and go, that goes against what we all talked about before, and being confident in what we do. Run with whatever you do. Run with your job. And if you screw up, go with it. You can't go back and do it. Don't dwell on it. Next time you step out on that football field, the past is in the past. People aren't going to remember that one thing you did. They'll remember how confident you looked. And the next time you're in front of them, they're going to have so much higher expectations for you because they remember how confident you were. And hopefully your confidence will spread into your group and you will do well. Stick around for our next video where we're going to talk about basic mace techniques.